Welcome to ZenMadman's day 7 of the thing. We're playing some PLO, 50 cent a dollar. It is 10 a.m. in sunny-ish, pretty sunny, California. And we're going to try to focus on each player's actions through every hand in the session. And, when we get some chat going, which is always welcome, it's possible that I'll end up with a little bit of distraction. Like here, I'm already distracting myself. So we had a open limp. The flop came ace 10-3, which, a limper, you'd think they don't have a lot of ace. Ace 10 is the nuts now. I mean, ace is still the nuts, but if you have ace 10, you also have the nuts because nobody can have ace. And we could have a quads over quads situation. Probably don't. All right. So far what we've learned is that we have at least one opponent who likes to see the flop for cheap if they can. So, it's probably a pretty good table, and then they decide to raise here. This hand is not very good. All the cards connect, right? The 8 connects to the 5 and the 4, and then the deuce connects to the 5 and the 4, but they're very low. And when we do make straights or straight draws, they're very often not going to be to the nuts. When we make pairs, they're going to be the bottom pairs. The raiser goes ahead and bets again on this, they c-bet on ace-king 4, which, monotone, I think there's probably a good amount of checking that should happen. They'll have some queen-high flush draws and, in their rundowns and their suited queens and stuff like that. But in position decides to put some pressure on. If you flop a flush, I think that's a reasonable spot to... I'm going to go ahead and fold this. It looks pretty, but I don't think it's that good against a raise. Maybe it's a hand that you can throw a 3-bet in from time to time. I think double suited is often a very big deal when you're 3-betting because you want that little extra equity, and even if your flush draws aren't to the aces or whatever, when you 3-bet, you're more likely to have a heads-up hand. So... this is a hand I will certainly open in the button. It looks pretty nice, right? The ace, king, and queen. We got 3 Broadway cards. The deuce is also connecting to the ace. It's a terrible card, but on the button with an ace high suit, I think this would be a pretty comfortable open raise. However, the cutoff has already gotten involved, and that dissuades me from getting involved, right? Really kind of monster flop for our hand if we were on this board having 13 outs to a straight. We've got 3 cards that compare: the ace, the queen, and the 10. All of those give us the nuts. We have 1 of each, so that means 3 times 3, right? There's only 3 remaining aces, yada yada yada, plus 4 nines. Of course, 4 of those cards wouldn't have given us the nuts because they were spades, so we would have had 9 outs to the nuts on the flop. That being one of them, of course, we would have turned the nuts, which would have been very pleasant. And this hand, I believe, is not very good. The 9 and the 7, they connect, and the 7 and the 4 connects, and the 4 and the ace. So it's not super terrible. In terms of opening the cutoff, I think it's probably a little too weak. I would open this hand on the button. King 4 deuce, very dry. Very dry. Drier than a British sense of humor. And the 6, though, pretty wet card, right? The only open-ender got there, 5-3. And thus the wraps probably got there. Also brought a flush draw out there. Someone who liked this flop, might be interested in the river. They could have a hand like King Deuce, I guess. On the turn, you could check back something like King Deuce, King 4, I suppose. Worried that, and here, nines, it's nice to have 9s, but you want the other 2 cards to be doing something. And they're doing something, but not very much. So we go ahead and fold there. All right. I am in the big blind, and I have a hand that, I'll take a free flop, but I don't think I'm going to be calling any kind of raises with this. Fun fact, you can't make a straight without a 10 or a 5, and the only straight you can't make with 10-5 is a 9 high straight. Although none of that's true in PLO. Except for the fact that there are no straights without a 10 or a 5 in them, right? You need one or the other. All right, 238 on the board. Pretty decent for a razor, right? There's like a lot of this, there's two bricks basically that people shouldn't have too much of. So you're going to run into a lot fewer sets. You're going to run into a lot fewer two pair hands. Of course, you can still run into those hands. Nobody decided to bet the flop though, not including the, pre-flop razor. I imagine you probably want something more than just a bear overpair, four ways to see bet, but I could see, justification for putting money in there. All right, lots of combo draws that arose on the turn, right? People who had, some Broadway type hands are could also pick up hearts and all of a sudden be very interested. 8, 9, 10, Jack, Queen with hearts is like a monster draw here. Okay, the person who raised clearly didn't have a set of nines, I think, which was one of the hands I was thinking they could have. It feels like nobody's that likely to have a boat here because the button probably would have bet something like a set. Like, this is a very curious bet. Like, what are they saying they have? Tens. Tens won the hand. Yeah, so I think I made a good read in terms of identifying the fact that it didn't really make sense for anybody in that hand to have something big, like a boat, or even trips at that point, right? I mean, somebody could have like a dangler that they hit. Here I am going to overlimp. I'm getting 7-1 immediate, but more importantly, the implied odds could be pretty decent. I flop a jack-high flush draw, four ways out of position, not so fantastic. My jacks also not that powerful, four ways out of position. Everybody limped, which means I think there's probably a little bit more of the pocket threes, pocket twos, deuce three, like random, 10-3, 10-2 in their ranges. I don't see any point in contesting this pot out of position multi-way. It just isn't a very profitable situation. If you gave me my tens back, I'd be pretty happy. Wait, did I have tens? No, I had fives. Anyway, the other person had tens, and they won the pot with tens, which is hilarious. So I'm going to say very sticky, because that was a hero call they made there. The other person had a big draw that bricked, and then the river went check check. So it was a pretty reasonable spot, I think, for them to fire off a bluff, just in terms of like they made a good read that nobody had that much. The problem is that it was hard for them to have a convincing story about having a big hand themselves, right? That didn't seem very credible. Maybe 8-8 could have decided, I'm just going to flat a raise on the turn and see what happens. I don't know. But no, but they don't have 8-8 because they check back the flop. And I mean, sure, they could have 8-8, but they should mostly be betting it on the flop. All right, so we lost our friend on our left, but we've got many other friends at this table. Very friendly table. Haha, speaking of a sense of humor, I miss seeing W.C. Fields in this background. Oh, yeah. Yeah, W.C. is kind of taking a nap on the desk. I'll set that up. I saw a meme recently about streamers, and it was like, we've got this very organized background, which I wouldn't say my background is very organized, but it's more organized than the floor. So yeah. This is the sort of hand that I think in the past I was raising because I was like, oh well, the king's suited and I have king queen and the 7 and the 3 stretch, but like it's not very good. I think it doesn't make the cut. If I'm raising this hand, I think I'm raising like 60%. So yeah. I'll bring back WC soon. Yeah, W.C. Fields, whose I think famous quote about poker was, someone's like, "It's a game of chance." He's like, "Not the way I play it," uh, which is it could mean two things. One, it could mean that one is a very accomplished poker player, and that there are elements of chance, but that it's primarily a game of skill, which that's fair. That's I mean, that's how I see it, right? That it is a game of chance, but it's also a game of skill, and over the long run, it's more a game of skill than a game of chance. But it could also mean that he's like, stacking the deck or cheating. So that's definitely not how I mean it, if I were to say it. I'm gonna fold. I have a whole chapter in my book somewhere about integrity and playing by the rules and yada yada yada. Okay. which might seem like an odd thing for an anarchist to talk about, but as long as rules are voluntarily accepted and engaged in, I'm all for them. It's simply when there are coercive factors, including force, that we have big issues. Okay, ace jack, ace queen jack 8. If this was double suited, it would be a good like 4-betting type hand, I think. Here, I kind of smashed this board. I'm just going to keep betting. And there are a ton of bad turn cards, right? A 4, a 5, a 7, a 9, a 10, a jack. All of those are going to put a potential straight on board. And then this hand also, I think the 8-7-5 looks nice together, but the queen is really just this card that's off in its own land. And, you know, I'm suited to the 7, which is the lowest card in my hand, or the lowest possible suit I could hold, given this combination of ranks. You know, pretty good flop for my hand. Not amazing. Whenever we flop these kind of, you know, trips, we want to see whether our trips are drawing to a larger boat than a boat that could have flopped. For instance, here, if someone had 9-9, well, now they'd have quads. But if they had flopped 9-9, then we would have one out to beat them only. We would need that case 7. Whereas if it were reversed and it was like 9-9-7 and we had a 9, then we have 10 outs to beat pocket 7s, right? Which is a very different situation. All right, so there's a lot of action here. On the turn, really 9-7, 9-9, and 7-7 are the only really good hands. Somebody could have like a 9 with a bunch of overcards and maybe like a 10-8 of spades or something, and that could be kind of nice because then they'd also have the straight flush outs as well as the boat outs to beat something like 7s full. But they can't have 7s full there. They'd have 9s full of 7s. They'd be drawing to beat 9s full of 7s though too with a 10-8. So, all right. So I have 4 cards to a straight flush. Unfortunately, 3 of them are in my hand, so I'm only allowed to use 2 of those. So it's going to be really hard to make a straight flush. I don't have any of the actual board. I'm blocking a lot of potential draws, so I think this is an interesting bluffing hand for that reason. I just have so little equity. But I think if you're going to be betting with relative air, this is probably on the side of the ones you want to do it with. And I am going to go ahead and put a half pot bet out here. I feel like it's very unlikely my opponent has anything. And so they're just going to let me have the pot, which is nice. I appreciate it. I appreciate you. I don't know. That's this thing everybody starts saying. I didn't notice it till I heard it at like a seminar. I was like, oh. But if you say it to everyone, like, do you mean it? I don't know. Whatever. All right. My ace-10 suited and pocket 3s takes it down without a contest. They were terrified. They knew I had the goods. And, you know, 9s with a suited ace and a jack. Pretty nice offering in the small blind. We will win 3 pots in a row now. We're on a streak. Oh, and we're going to play this one for sure. I don't think this is a table where we're going to be catching a whole lot of 3-bets against us. Watch them 3-bet right now. But, all right, so we want to think about this, right? If we hit a set, so we're full stack. So if we hit a set, there's potentially pretty good implied odds from that. We also can flop some pretty strong straight draws. Now, the 9 with the king-queen isn't fantastic. We're suited to the king, not the ace. But I think overall it's a pretty good spot to be in. We flop trips, and we don't have a lot of kickers. I do think they're going to have ace-ace here a lot, and probably not a king. We're blocking the king. 10-10 isn't that big of a 3-betting hand pre-flop. If we were to get raised, this would be a very uncomfortable spot because we don't have a whole lot of cards to draw to the boat. Again, I still think that they have a lot of ace-ace. Let's see. But then they'd really only have like 2 outs unless they have a jack or a queen. No, a jack would not be an out. I'm going to bet half pot again. And if the only things that beat me are, I mean, there's ace-king, right? Which I think they'd probably see-bet the flop if they had a hand like ace-king, jack-queen, whatever. Or like ace-ace-king. And now, can I squeeze a value bet out on the river? Like, getting called by aces, kings, I don't know. I think they definitely don't have like 10-10 or king-10 very often. I am concerned about a hand like ace king, but they're so on the loose passive side. I think I can try to get like a crying call from aces, or if they had a 10. Okay, they have the same hand and they have the open-ended straight draw, so I might have been trying to go a little too thin there. I'm really not sure. The ace king queen look nice, but the 7 is totally useless and we have no suits, so I'm going to fold in the hijack. I'm going to mark that hand for review. Let's see what they had. King, queen, jack, 6, double suited. Okay, so they had a very similar hand to us. We had a pair, but they had, you know, an extra suit, and the jack's a little better card than. They did have one pretty useless card, I think. Let's see. Right, the 6. So I'm not so sure about the 3-bet preflop, but it seems like it's probably okay. And I guess they were playing it passively because they were concerned about ace king as well, which seems legit. So yeah, I think I'm like looking at their stats now, 40-30. What did I make a note on? They were open limping earlier. Interesting. Oh, now they're 40. What? I guess they were playing more aggressively at the shorter handed, which is fine. I mean, that if anything, it makes sense. But I think I had a certain read about the player, and then I feel like, oh, maybe that read's a little off. So it's important to make reads in poker to try to get an idea of what our opponents are doing, as that's something that we can often exploit. And even if we're not interested in trying to exploit it, we still want to have an idea of like whether there's a game that we want to be playing, right? If we don't have any idea how good our opponents are, we're never going to know when we're sitting at a table and we're up against a bunch of other players who are trying to play seriously, if we're not paying any attention to that. And those aren't games that we really want to be playing in unless, you know, we're at high stakes and we're like a world beater and the rake's really low. But in these high rake environments, you don't want to be messing around playing with a bunch of other players who are even trying, right? You want to be playing in games where people are gambling, where people are like, yeah, it's a game of chance the way I play it, right? Like just put the money in, or like have some fun. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with having that approach to poker. I think the majority of poker players do. I think most poker players have some idea that like they want to do something skillful, they want to outplay someone, you know, this one time or whatever, stuff like that, but aren't necessarily like expecting to make money in the long run. And you know, if it's a mode of entertainment, like that's great. You know, if that's what you find fun. I find winning fun, but I certainly don't look down on people who play more for the enjoyment of the game, for the gamble, for the action. And I mean, it's, you know, sometimes you read people talking about people who play poorly as like not being intelligent or whatever. I've often found like almost the opposite, where I've played with a lot of very intelligent people, like in terms of, you know, live poker. I'm sure it's also true online, but I don't know anything about the people online. But, you know, very intelligent people who are just like, yeah, I'm gambling because I want to. And like, sometimes if you get them in the wrong mood, then all of a sudden they're going to start playing seriously. It's like, oh, great. You know, you know, you want them to want to gamble with you and have fun. And that's a little ulterior motive to like, you know, being nice and decent person. Although some people like try to like needle people, which I'm not a big fan of, but you know, you do you. Back to the hand at hand. Ace 7-7-5 with a nut suit. I'm definitely playing this hand. I'm just deciding between overlimping and raising. I think there's gonna be enough good flops here where, but also getting heads up and having something like a 7 high flush draw is going to have more utility heads up than it would multi-way. Set of 7, similarly, I'm going to feel more confident with heads up than multi-way. I think I can make a smaller c-bet on a board like this, ace 8-3, unless they have clubs and ace, or you know, some kind of a set. They're going to have a hard time continuing. Not a lot of straight draws on the flop. Of course, one of the straight draw, the only possible straight draw, right? The low end, the wrap, got there. On the turn, I think they probably have a better ace than me. Now clubs came and the board paired. I do I have too much showdown value to bet to like bluff here? Probably not, because there's just nothing that I can beat. But at the same time, I would like to have a club to bluff on this. I do have an ace, which is nice, but I'm just gonna go ahead and win against what now? Okay, okay. So I said it would be hard to call without clubs or an ace or a set, but they begged to differ. They decided that 10-9-6-5. There was already the 8 there. Maybe the 7 comes on the turn. They have a big wrap, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, it seems like they're playing for fun, and that's cool. And we'll take it. We'll take it. If I bet, I probably would have taken it down, but file that under not bluffing with showdown value, and sometimes you just win anyway. So I think I maybe overestimated how much Ace X they'd have in their range, but like Ace X and club seemed like the most likely things to check call that flop with. What do I know? I think they had what? They had like a backdoor flush draw, right? No, it's too late. Too late. Moving on. Next hand, Queen 10-8 with a tray. Not a good hand. But, it's got 3 cards connected, so it's the sort of hand that you'll see people playing 50, 60, 70% of their hands are going to be playing this hand. Because I think there's a psychological effect when the 3, which is the dangler, right, meaning like it's a useless card that doesn't connect to any of the other cards in terms of rank, when it's suited to one of the main, the cards that does connect, I think people look at it like, oh, well, this card is playing a role because it's suited. But of course, 2 of the other cards could have been suited, and this could have been offsuit, and then the card just looks like garbage, and somehow that hand looks better. This hand looks better to people sometimes, I think, than the other one, which just, I don't know, psychology. Overall, like, people want to play hands because playing hands is generally more fun than not playing hands. Sitting around folding all day. In a live poker game, I think you need good company. Someone to chat their ear off. Hi, Brian. And meaning that I would do so. No aspersions being cast. But I think having people to talk to, that's kind of the joy and the fun of live poker, beyond like making a soul read or such things. But online, you don't have that, so you can play a bunch of tables, or you can play a bunch of hands, or you can have something else going, or you can talk to your stream. Hello, stream. I actually do find it a lot easier to focus on the game. Like, I'm not necessarily focusing on every hand I'm not involved in, but every hand I'm involved in, because I'm forcing myself to narrate my thought process, to explain what I'm thinking. It's very difficult to not focus, right? There's not really room for that. It'd make a fairly terrible stream. Okay, this hand is decent. If there's not a raise, I'm definitely going to play it. For a raise, I'm going to go ahead and fold from the cutoff. Maybe this is a 3-betting hand against a button. Not totally sure. Have I marked any hands yet? Yes, I have marked 1 hand. Oh yeah, that hand was interesting, but I feel like we discussed it fairly in depth, so hopefully we'll have some more hands that we don't go as deep on, and have some questions we want to verify the answers to, or seek out answers. All right. So this is a 1-gapper, right? Meaning that we have 4 cards that are almost in a row. We have 8, 7, 6, 4, right? So the gap is the 5. We're missing the 5. When you have a 1-gapper, you want the gap to be at the bottom because you're just going to make better straight draws. This I totally miss. I mean, I could catch a 3 of spades and a 5 of spades and have a straight flush, which would be very nice. And a card like this, I think I'm actually going to bet on the turn. Because now, first of all, I have kings and 7s, and it's very easy for them to just have overcards that are gonna have a lot of outs, that if I bet here, they're just gonna fold all those overcards unless they have spades or something. And, my 7 can be good, right? So if they have a hand like queen, jack, whatever, with like queen, high spades or something, my hands can be good. Now I'm gonna check it back. I mean, I guess I can bet this. has a bluff. I'm not blocking any of the things I really want to block. And so they had 7-10. And they picked up better spades on the turn. So I was in very bad shape on the turn. Let's see. Okay, so if the ace was suited, I would raise this very quickly. I think I'm going to raise it anyway in the cutoff, and we're going to mark it and look at this as a pre-flop question. Being in the cutoff, I am comfortable raising, if I'm a little too wide in the cutoff, then I'm going to have better situations than if I'm a little too wide in the earlier positions. I'm not going to have as many people calling behind me. Now, this player behind me has been a little bit loose. Oh, and you know what? Let's mark the hand we just played in terms of what do I want to do? I want to consider whether a river bluff was a good idea. And I guess mostly I would have been trying to get a 7 to fold. On this hand, I have one card blocking hearts. I have one ace. Now I have a double gut shot. A king or a 9 would make me some manner of straight. That's not really exciting when somebody can have a flush. Now they check back the flop, but if they have a small flush, checking back the flop is a very reasonable approach. And I think we're gonna let that one pass. Now we are gonna mark the player behind us as someone who enjoys the open limping. And we're going to keep an eye on, a few more hands. I'll probably mark them as green. But if they fold the next few hands, then maybe not. All right, so it's a limped pot. King 7 deuce is the driest board in creation. There's no straight draws. There's no flush draws as it's rainbow. The jack completes the rainbow, so nobody's going to make a flush this hand. Any card on the turn is going to present some straight draws. So here, a set of kings, like king would actually be the nuts. You can't make anything better than that. Fairly uncommon to have a set be the nuts, but it can happen with pocket aces, pocket kings, or pocket queens. All right, jacks with a suited 5 and a 10. This is a 3-card hand, and I don't think I want to be playing that many of my pocket jacks. I'll mark this because my question is not so much whether I play this here in the low jack, which I don't believe I do. My question is more, all right, this one was pre-flop, all right, that ace, jack, 8. My question is more, what position do I start playing this? Because I feel confident raising this on the button, but I'm not as sure what I want to do with it if I'm, say, the cutoff or the hijack. I think I'm in the realm where I'm looking at this saying, okay, this is definitely an open on the button. Pretty sure it's a fold in the low jack. But at what point, what position does it become a hand I want to play? And so that's something to improve, something to learn. All right, this player behind us is literally playing 100% of their hands so far. We're going to mark them a friend of the game and proceed accordingly. So the player across from us, we see that there's this huge gap between their VPIP, their voluntarily put money in pot, and their PFR, their pre-flop raise, right? So they're playing a lot of hands that they're not raising, which generally is not a great strategy, but they're only playing a third of their hands, which isn't that far off from how many they should be. And so far, the hands that we have seen have not been like super out of line. And we did see them make a big bluff. I think it was this player in a situation where it seemed called for. All right, so I have middle pair, a gut shot to what wouldn't be the nuts because king queen would then be the nuts, and a backdoor 10 high flush draw. Not really something I want to draw to, even heads up. But I am out of position as well. But that was a sort of free flop that if we get another free card or two, it can be interesting. But yeah, my point about the player directly across from us, this player number 3, is like we can see their pre-flop strategy and maybe have a little bit of disdain for it in terms of like, oh, you should be raising a lot more hands. But at the same time, like they're playing about the right hands, right? I'm not sure how to tell how positionally aware they are without like watching every hand, but you know, if they're mostly like overlimping and cold calling with the hands they want to see flops with, they're probably not going to be a big source of value unless they're doing some things really bad post flop. Which so far I feel like we haven't seen. I feel like they played reasonably post. Here we have the raise and the call. Jack 9 deuce, pretty wet board, right? A lot of those big cards have flops top two, or a pair and a straight draw, or a big wrap. It feels like, you know, the out of position player now is going to go ahead and bomb it. King 10 got there, 10 8 got there. So this turn really changed the nature of the board, right? It took it from being a board where, and now the river, again, a board where there's a lot of draws to a board where there's a straight that can be the nuts. So anybody could have a strong hand on that turn. Now, if somebody did have like King 10, this is a very bad river card for them, right? All the two pair, top two got there, flush got there. I would say the button probably had something along the lines of like King 10 with spades. That's my guess. Sorry, I'm going to pop this up and let's see what they had. I'll pop the board up so you can remember it, right? There it is in the middle. And the button had King, King, 10, 8. Okay, so they did have King 10. They only had one spade. So the river value bet, I think, is very ambitious, right? On the river, they decided to go ahead and bet a straight for value when the flush and the boat came in. And then they got raised, and then they called. So very ambitious value betting there. And I'm actually going to make a note of that. Straight on board pairing. Let's see. I'm just going to overlimp this, as I think we're very likely to get a 4 or 5-way limped pot. And if I was coming in, I would come in for a raise. But this player's already come in. And I have no suits. So I've got 2 set draws and I can make a straight. So we're going to try and flop a set, succeed, and it's like, now this player's raised so infrequently, it makes me feel like they have aces a really, really high percentage of the time. So I'm not like thrilled with my hand the way I would be if there were no ace on board. Even if it was a king or a queen, I would feel differently, right? And I don't want to be like very afraid here, but at the same time, I think a certain level of caution is warranted. Partially because even if they don't have the top set, it's very easy for them to have top pair or top and bottom or something like that with the nut flush draw because the ace is not of the suit. And this turn card was quite poor. They've decided to continue going ahead and betting full pot. And I think I can actually just fold here. If the turn were a brick, it would be a fairly different situation. We haven't seen this player be very aggressive. So, you know, this is very much a, you know, read-based. We had a set draw pre-flop, right? Hit a set. But because of the context of the pre-flop action and then the specifics of the actual board that we flopped a set on, I think our hand is much weaker than it otherwise would be. And, you know, I just think that Razor is going to be heavily weighted towards ace-ace. And when they don't have ace-ace, they're still going to have a lot of equity. So basically, we have one out if we're behind, and they have a bunch of outs if they're ahead. And then on the turn was particularly poor in that they can have, you know, king 10 to go with whatever if they didn't have ace-ace, right? They can flop some wraps and they got there. And then we'd have a lot more outs than if they had ace-ace. But overall, I think it was a situation to play carefully. And if they checked back the turn, that was a brick or whatever, then maybe I put a river bet out there. Maybe I call one more bet if it's on the smaller side. But the way the board ran out, river calls raise. Yeah, the way the board ran out, I think my hand's a fold. You know, a set is not the nuts, and in PLO you don't always need the nuts, but you always need to be very like hyper aware of the nuts in a way that you know, in Hold'em, you want to be aware of the nuts, but it's more like there's this upper region of hands that you want to be aware of. And when you have the second nuts, usually, you know, you're either going to win the pot or you're going to go broke, right? If you have second nuts against nuts, usually you're just putting stacks in No Limit Hold'em. Whereas in PLO, sometimes you get away from the second nuts, and often the second nuts becomes not the second nuts in a hurry. All right, so I'm very happy to catch a free flop with a 10-10 jack with a suited jack. This board, I've got a gut shot, backdoor jack high flush draw, not fantastic. I'm not blocking any of the straights. I am blocking some, some pair, two pair type things, pair plus hands, I guess. There should be a more concise way of saying, like, blocking pairs, yes, but also two pair and sets, more importantly. I've got to come up with some shorthand for that. I think there are improvements to be had. As there are in my setup. I have my microphone set so it's right in front of my clock. Now I don't want to touch it because it'll make a horrible sound, but I'm just like, okay. That's how long. There's something over here probably too, right? That's saying, yeah, there it is. Okay. How many minutes into the stream we are. If this was a live game, or back in the day on Poker Stars, where you could just like quit the game and then rejoin a different seat, you'd want to take this seat that the new player just took, probably, because then you'd have position on this very loose player. I wonder whether this is one of the same player that we had on our left yesterday. No, not the one on our left. The one to the left of them. The one on our left yesterday was raising almost every hand. All right, so there, the Jack 7, they had the straight flush draw to go with the third nut flush on the flop, and they're blocking the straight flush, which is nice when when you're trying not to get raised with a hand. This I will open on the button, but I will fold to a raise. We need a substantially stronger hand to play against an open raise from the low jack particularly. One of the things I learned from the PLO launch pad is, you have to respect the under the gun range or the low jack range, right? If someone's 3 off the button and they're raising, now this person also hasn't raised a whole lot of hands, so, even a little bit more respect. But in general, that range is pretty strong. It's got a lot of ace-ace combos, even if they're raising, fairly solid aggressive range. A lot of that range is made up of aces, like something like 15-16% of it. Maybe 14, I don't know, somewhere in there. But that's a lot of those hands. Oh, ace, king, deuce, deuce with the ace suit. I think I'm going to let this one pass. If the button were a very, like, super tight player, like this player 4 over here, I believe I would raise this, as it would almost be like I was the button. And yeah, occasionally they're going to 3-bet me or cold call. But, 7% of hands, they probably mostly only play hands with an ace or a king. So I'm blocking a lot of their playing range. However, the player behind me is playing almost every hand. So if I raise the cutoff, I'm going to get called behind me. So I think I want to be on a slightly tighter range than usual. All right, lots of straights, right? Jack 8, 8-6, 6-4. No, just 3, just the 2. I'm not sure why I was thinking 6-4 was a straight. Maybe I was thinking this 9 was an 8, whatever. But so pot, like they probably have a straight a fair amount. They can have 2 pair. They can have a pair with a straight draw very easily. Or, that's a board where people can have 2 pair with an open ender or with a straight, right? With a made straight, and just totally be crushing the board. Ace, king, jack, deuce, rainbow, I'm going to fold. If I had a suited ace, this is a pretty nice hand where you've got the 3 Broadway cards. The deuce also connects to the ace. And let's take a peek at how many hands I've marked. 5 hands. All right, so we're doing pretty well in terms of having stuff to talk about after the session. This would have been an interesting board where I flopped top 2 and then not a flush draw, but the nut flush draw blocker. So there wouldn't be a whole lot for people to continue with. There'd be the straight draw and weaker flush draws, But if the weaker flush draw came there and they were, you know, kind of a solid thinking player, I might be able to get them to fold the weaker flush by just kind of ramming through with my king of spades. It would also make it easier to bet the turn with, you know, with my two pair. Not that I would necessarily want to, but I would know that they didn't have the nuts. And so I'd be very unlikely to get raised. I wonder what good bet sizing is when a flush comes in general. Like, do we usually want to go big, whether it's the nut blocker or a flush, or do we... I think probably, right? Intuitively, when the board changes like that, I feel like we probably mostly want to be making the larger size bets, but that might not be correct. Like on those monotone boards, I think the bet sizing is generally on the smaller size, and is certainly infrequent. I've gotta review some materials. All right, ace four deuce with a 9. The 9's such a bad card. It doesn't even connect to the 4 or the ace. So, you know, with the suit being to the 4, this person's tanking. For some reason, I was thinking I was a small blind because it looks like there's 2 blinds, but this person basically, you know, they play all their hands. We'll take a flop with this hand. It's not a bad hand to get a free flop with. I have some runner draws and ace high, and they're gonna bet or not, and I'm just gonna try to win a pot with ace high. If I hit an ace on the river, I mean, king queen would get there, but I don't think king queen's super likely since they didn't bet the flop. I don't really give them credit for having too much, but I'm very confident that what I have is ace high and not better than that. So I think going ahead and folding there is the sensible thing to do. All right, so our friend on our right is sitting out. Yeah, look at these stats. The player across from us is now 50-42. So that means out of 12 hands or so, they've called 6 and they've raised 5, right? I think that's 5/12. That looks a lot like 5/12 to me. 2-2-2. Interesting flop. So very bad flop for a hand like ours, where, I mean, we can make a straight, but anyone with a pocket pair already has a boat, and we can't make a boat because even if a running pair came, we'd have to use one of our cards from our hand. This hand, I will open raise, even though the player behind me is very loose. This is where that sort of like, do you want to have an open limping range thing kind of comes up. I'm going to just sort of pass on that question and not have that be a part of my online game. All right, I have ace with a good kicker. I have a gut shot wheel draw. I have no diamonds, which I don't like. I think I mostly want to c-bet here with diamonds. I pretty much always want to have an ace. I feel like I've seen this player before, and they're 3/4 pot betting against miss c-bet. I am going to call. I think if a 4 comes, a queen or a 10 that aren't diamonds, really not having any diamonds is giving me pause. I have the nut blocker, but I'm not going to try and move this player off a hand ever. And now they bet 3/4 again. I haven't improved. There are more bad things that can happen now after this. I am going to go ahead and fold, you know, which then brings up the question, should I have folded the flop or should I have like half potted it myself? I felt like folding was too weak, and I think I don't bet enough hands there. I mean, I understand the idea that, yeah, in general, we're supposed to check cutoff out of position, but that's against somebody who's playing, you know, well, and that's also, you know, it's not against like a close to 100% range. All right, very easy to defend. You know, can think about 3-betting, but I don't think it would be particularly a good hand to 3-bet. I think I at least want like an ace or a king to block some of their, you know, their better hands. 8s and 10s, the king comes, certainly can hit them. I feel like they're gonna have a lot of their pre-flop range that just doesn't have an 8, I think. And then they full pot turn, which is like really like they're representing king here. That's what they're representing. So there's a lot of not king that they're gonna have in their range. Unfortunately, they're going to have king as well, and certainly more of it than I am. And they could have a hand like queen and think they're bluffing. I'm not quite sure why they would do that, but I think that's a thing a person could do. All right. So we have a post in the hijack, which is generally inadvisable, but we're not going to give it too much thought. There's so now this person's like back to playing passively. It's really interesting how shorthanded. They're pretty aggressive, and once there's like 5 or 6 players, they just like sink back into this like very very chill. Like I'm gonna see a lot of flops really on the cheap. All right, so pre-flop, not too much discussion. I have aces and nobody raised. You know, I'm gonna put more money in the pot. I have a nut suit on this board. My hand's pretty good and heads up. I would do betting here, but with 3 opponents, I'm not. I am blocking the nut flush draw. I'm not blocking any of the pair type things, and they full pot it. Like, for real? Probably a set. Seems like this player's MO. We know they can't have the nut flush draw. That would be the main bluffing hand that they might be trying to do something with here. This is a sort of card that we could put a lot of pressure on people with because we have the ace of clubs. And this person bets $1, and they're probably just going to get called because the other player doesn't have the nuts. But then they're going to look at this dollar and be like, what's that? You know? It's weird that they made it 29.55. Like, they didn't just jam. And they have a 8 high flush. Yeah, so on the flop, they had a gutter, which they hit, but they also made the flush. That was a very weird hand, and they potted it. Let's see. That was an interesting hand. All right. 10-10-8, fairly poor flop for our double suited aces. Having the king and the 5, this is a premium ace-ace combo. Except having the king, we're not going to get 3-bet that much. Out of position, I think our opponent might check a 10 here fairly often. I'm losing to any 10 and Jack 9. Against Jack 9, I can hit a Jack. Against a 10, I can only hit an ace. Not a great spot. I do think this person is going to bet a whole lot on the river, and for that reason, I'm going to make what is maybe a pretty nitty kind of fold here. But they have 4 cards. It's really easy for one of them to be a 10. Yeah, this 4 is just very poor. That one I'm going to mark. Both of those, actually. You know, betting the flop with the 10-10-8, I can do something like bet half pot or bet 2/3. It seemed like the sort of board that really hits a calling range a lot, but again, our opponent has such a wide range, it's very easy for them to just have 4 random cards that maybe have nothing to do with each other or the board, but any one of those cards could very easily be one of the 2 remaining 10s. And if they're betting very frequently when we check back, then we definitely want to call the turn bet. But I haven't quite seen that so far. But maybe that is in that sort of the population over stabs idea. Like they bet too much out of position in that spot. I can certainly have a bunch of queen-queen also when I check back. Was it this hand we want to check, right? For pre-flop. And we'll play maybe one more orbit after this one, and then do a session review. All right, 7-4, 8-6-5. They make a straight, and on the turn they had a not flush draw, right? Yeah, although the board had paired. So, oh, let's see what this other person was betting with. So Jack 8, 3, 7. So they had a pair. Were they betting? The bet came from the big blind on that turn. Yeah, so it seems like they do a fair amount of bluffing, and so actually investigating what someone's doing every hand. So okay, so this is a case in point. This person has been betting a lot, right? And I can try and play this hand aggressively. I think there's nothing wrong with that. But I think if this person is bluffing too much, I just want to give them rope, right? Go ahead, bet, yeah. And again, I can raise, but I'm just going to give him more rope. Just go ahead, keep betting. And it's important to realize that my hand isn't like super strong here, right? I mean, I have 3-3, which is a boat, but a 4 with a 5, a 9, or a 3 all beat me, as do pocket 5s and pocket 9s. So I'm going to call, right? But this is a very nice spot to be able to play it kind of passively. And okay, so they happened to hit a 2-outer, right? But I'm happy with how I played the hands, because if they hadn't hit that 2-outer, I think there's a reasonable chance they just keep betting anyway. And if you look at how much money they put in on the um, flop and the turn, they bet the flop. Oh, the turn they made a wheel, which is pretty good. And I probably could have raised and gotten a decent amount of money in against it. But the river, if they had, the straight, could I have gotten? All right, so these are very poor queens, but I think against these players, I want to play them, and I'm just going to come in for a raise. They actually fold a hand in the small blind, which is interesting. But yeah, we've seen this player now. We've seen them make a fair number of kind of just like, let's see, hold on a second. Sorry, we wanted to mark that one, and then this one. How much better are queens than jacks? This one I will also open, but I think it is maybe close. I don't know. The suit, the 3 and the 7 connect. But yeah, we've seen this player now make some kind of bluffy. The one where they had the where they turned the wheel and they made the 9s full. I think their flop bet is pretty reasonable. Like, I don't have to have a 4 or anything there. And if I don't, then they have 9s and 4s, which, they do want to deny equity with. Here, my queens 4 ways are just, I think, not worth very much. I'm going to go ahead and fold them. And what do I want to do? I'm going to mark this hand pre-flop as well. I feel like there's maybe some discontinuity with my Jack, Jack, King 4 fold and my Queen, Queen 7, 3 raise. Both of those were in the cutoff. They feel like they're roughly the same strength of hand, because the jacks are weaker than the queens, but the other one was suited to the king and had a king which connected to the jacks instead of like the 7 and the 3, which is pretty poor. So I think one or the other of those hands should have been played the opposite way. So, i.e., both hands probably should have been played the same. All right. What's going on now? So the lower straight just got there, right? The original straight draw from the flop just got there. Not the sort of draw that people are going to have very often. Like 5, 6, 7 is a possibility, but the smaller straight is going to be pretty infrequent. Of course, a player playing almost all of their hands is going to make. If you play literally all of your hands, then you're going to make all the straights at the same rates, right? Because any 2 cards, you can just randomly have them. With a suit, I'm going to play this. Without a suit, I'm going to fold. Also, if the 6 were a 5, the hand would be slightly better. A 6 is higher than a 5, but the 5 actually connects with the ace for a straight. So that's why, the generally ace 5 is going to be better than ace 6. We're going to come in here, probably get a flop. And, 3 Broadway cards. And so I have all of this. And I'm going to test the theory of this person betting too frequently, right? We're going to test this theory again. And this time, if an ace or a jack comes, I'm definitely going to. This is a bad card because, first of all, I no longer have the nuts, right? But more importantly, I think it's going to shut down, like if they have a random king or whatever. It's I have the nut blocker. I don't want to have the ace of spades in my hand when I have a boat already and that turn card comes. Let's see what they did have. And the reason I bet the river is because I felt like if they didn't bet the turn, they're probably not going to bet the river. All right, we have queen 10 suited and 4-2 suited. That doesn't really make a thing. So they did actually make a jack high flush on the turn. I think they played their hand pretty reasonably, honestly. On the flop, they bet kings and 6s with a jack high flush draw, which, heads up, is kind of reasonable, I think. Maybe I should have put more pressure then and just like check raise flop and go bet against this player. I don't know, but I think if the turn were if the turn were like a 6, I win their money, because then they have 6s full of kings, I have kings full of 4, kings full beats 6s full. But I think they would have c-bet more often on the turn if they hadn't made their hand, if that makes sense. Like, they made a hand, all of a sudden they had enough to check it down, whereas if they felt like they could still get a better hand to fold, I think they keep betting. Yeah, let's call this the last round and then do a little session review. The daily review. Sounds like a newspaper. The daily poker review. Okay. All right, king 8. Mm-hmm. I have an idea for a different video format that I had already thought of, but then a friend suggested it as well. And so that makes me think that it's probably a pretty good format where, if you have an idea and then someone else has a similar idea, it's like, oh yeah, this is probably interesting, right? To at least one other person. But the idea being basically to do a session or do whatever sessions and have the session and then do the session review, but instead of having a video where the viewer can watch the session and then watch the session review, the idea would be to splice together, here's the hand in the flow of action, and then boom, here's the session review right away, and then here's another hand, boom, there's the session review, to kind of make, everything about one hand. Obviously, I'm not going to do that live on stream. I mean, there's a way of kind of going about it, but I don't think it's really what I want to. It would be very cumbersome, right? But to go back and kind of splice it together in that way, I think you could end up with some interesting content. Okay, so I have aces with a 5 deuce and a suit, and now there's a 3-bet, a call. These aren't the best aces in the world. I do have a suit, and this person, I feel like they have aces here a lot. Let me see how much I can make it. I can make it 60, right? 61.50? No, 49.50. All right, I was adding one more caller. I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm not super certain about it. If I had really garbage aces, I would just flat here for sure. And now we're going to have a 3-way pot where I'm going to have aces, and unless the board's really bad, we're just going to put the rest in, right? And maybe we're going to go broke on the last hand of the session again. Maybe we'll get a nice double up. I have the nut flush draw to go with my aces. This person probably has no aces. Nobody has aces. Oh, that is rough. Okay, so we lost all the money on the last hand again. We will mark that one for discussion. Review. Wow, I was doing a lot better pre-flop than I thought. Let's see. Display last hand. Yeah, so I had 44% pre-flop, which is nice. I had 43% on the flop. Everybody had the flush draw. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, we're going to proceed to the session review now. This is the first hand that I actually have, I think during the stream, kind of felt an emotional response to. It's a little bit hilarious after literally yesterday having flopping the nuts and getting it in good on the flop and then losing on what was already going to be the last hand, and then today to not flop the nuts but to flop quite well in a 3-way pot and have and then to lose again, just like right on the turn, right? So we'll take a deep breath and get to reviewing the hand. Okay, so this is the part of the session, post session, when we're trying to be dispassionate and not really think about in terms of evaluating my own play, in terms of learning from the hand. I think it's very important to try to avoid justifications, to try to avoid thinking too much about like what, oh, was I right? Was I wrong? more to learn lessons from the hand about what we should do in the future, right? And to deepen our understanding about how different equities interact, various things, aside from just like, was I right or was I wrong? That's not that important, right? I mean, yeah, we can find that out, but really what's important is, what will I do next time that will be better or the same, right? So we're either reinforcing something that we know we're doing right and we want to keep doing it that way, or we've got an opportunity to say, okay, we can do this better in the future, and in this exact situation, this is how we want to think about it. And yeah, that's a whole nother sort of format for something that I think would be also useful. We'll come back to that. No, I'm going to say it right now. The idea being, I saw this in a chess video somewhere. Someone was talking about when you're analyzing a chess game, right? You can look at all the different spots and see where you could have done something better, and try to learn like a dozen different things about where you could have made a better move. But it's much more valuable to look at how you played the hand or how you played the game, and to find one spot where, instead of thinking, what should I have done differently, think about, how did I come up with the move or the play or whatever that was a mistake, and how can I improve my thought process? Because if you can improve your thought process, that'll translate to far more than just that one instance, right? That you can actually raise the overall level of your game by improving your thought process. So let's see if we can get something like that out of this hand. But also, let's play around with equities and have some fun. Okay, so I skip the hand and save $111. No. Okay, so I have ace, ace, five deuce. Very strong hand. I raise it in the low jack. Very clear play, right? The next player makes it 12, and this player hasn't 3-bet a lot, so my immediate thought was like, oh, aces versus aces. But I think it's important to realize that the sample's only 28 hands, and I'm probably jumping a little too fast on this person probably just has a range of ace-ace sort of thing. So if they have anything but ace-ace, I'm a favorite. And I believe maybe if they have a rundown, it's pretty close. Maybe they're a slight favorite. But I do have a nut suit, right? I don't have bad aces. I have kind of medium aces, I think. So they raise, and then we get this flat. So once we get this flat from this not super out of line player, but like kind of loose, definitely kind of passive player, I think they probably don't have aces. Certainly we don't all three have aces. Check the deck. But if it's ace-ace and ace-ace against something else, like a rundown, that could be a not great situation. But if I, bet here and the other player jams, maybe this $12 gets folded. And then if it's aces versus aces, we've got this nice overlay. I think going ahead and just like piling it in, because we know we're going to have aces and we're going to have a very small stack to pot ratio on the flop, I think makes all the sense in the world, right? And I don't need to be like terrified, oh, this player probably has like ace, ace, king, queen double suited. Like, no, like they probably don't, right? There's a good chance they have aces, but they can have some other stuff, as we'll see in a moment. So, in terms of takeaways here, one takeaway would be, don't jump so rapidly to the conclusion that their 3-betting range is probably just ace-ace. I don't have that much information on my opponent, and people 3-bet other hands. So they call, which leads me to believe like they probably don't have ace-ace, and then this person calls, and because of the the stack sizes, it makes me feel like, okay, my aces are probably good, and unless the board comes like something super disgusting, I'm probably just going to rip it in. And in fact, maybe just rip it on any board, because I've got 62 back and there's 150 in the middle, right? So the stack to pot ratio is like 1 to 2 and change. So meaning that there's like almost like 2.5 times as much money in the pot as there is in my stack. So the money in my stack isn't something that I need to protect as much. More, I want to really go after and maximize my chance of winning this pot. So I go ahead and put my money in. I also have the nut flush draw, which makes this super easy, barely an inconvenience. And I think that even without it on this board, I'm still just going to rip it in. Even if I don't have a backdoor flush draw, I do have this wee straight draw, but on this board, there's not that much to think about. Now they rip it in and they rip it in, right? They call. So these other people, it's important to note that these other people have an extra $100 on top, right? So they're going to have a $200 side pot. And my bet puts this first player in a little bit of an awkward spot where they're not just calling 62 to win the 150 and the 62, right? The 212. They also know that they have this other player behind them. And that's probably why they jam with their, okay-ish hand. And the turn 4 is like nice because nobody can make 2 pair. But I forget whether anybody flopped a pair, and it turned out, yeah, so this person, right, they can't hit a 3 anymore to make 2 pair and beat me that way. They can still hit a 9 or a queen to win on the turn. And then this other player had, 10, 10, 7, 6. So they flop a wrap and a flush draw. Of course, nobody else's flush draw is live. I have the nut flush draw, but they do have this wrap and they get there. So they actually had quite good equity on the flop. The nice thing about having the flush draw from their standpoint is they're blocking my flush draw, my outs that would lock out their straight, right? If a diamond comes, boom, their straight's no good. They can't make a straight anymore. I mean, they can, but it won't win. And they can't really make a straight because they made a flush, and you can't play your straight if you played your flush. So, they end up winning the whole pot, which, hooray for them. $530 pot. That's pretty good in a $100 buy-in game. And what thoughts really are there here that I can learn anything from? Well, the flop, I don't think there's that much to think about, right? I think it's pretty straightforward. And looking at the hands, the cards exposed, I can think like, so this is what I got 3-bet by double suited queens, but like mediocre double suited queens. The 9 connects, but the 3 is a little dangler that doesn't help make like straights, doesn't help boost equity really. It's nice that it's double suited, but it doesn't add anything beyond that. And then 10, 10, 7, 6 with 1 suit, which seems like so that's what they're cold calling a 3-bet with, right? So 10, 10, 7, 6 double suited, or single suited, sorry. If it was double suited, it would obviously be better. Unless, it was diamonds and clubs, and then they would be totally covered. But this, I think, is a hand that is like, it's nice. Oh, okay, I got this hand on the button. But then when it goes raise 3-bet, like, I think you just let it go, right? It's not a premium hand. So the alteration, the 2 thoughts that I would have here. One, when somebody that I don't have that much information on puts that 3-bet out there, their range isn't going to be as heavily weighted towards aces as I was thinking, right? And 2, when somebody cold calls a 3-bet, even when they're this kind of like not like super loose player, they're still going to have some hands that aces are just crushing. So yeah, basically don't overestimate my opponent's ranges just because they put a good deal of money in before the flop, because they are not it's not this person, right? If this person with the 5 VPIP and the 0 PFR called a 3-bet cold, like they probably have aces or they have some premium rundown, right? But I think I just overestimated the quality of my opponent's ranges. Let's take a brief look at equities here. Launch equity calculator and hope that it doesn't break this time. So obviously on the river, my opponent has 100% equity. If we go back to the turn, doesn't, that's not really, I think I'm going to have quite a bit on the turn. Yeah, 55. And on the flop, we already saw, they're actually, I don't think they're a favorite over me, but they have a plurality of the equity, I suppose, because I'm ahead and the queens are taking away some of my equity, and then the 10, 10, the 10, 7, 6 basically is taking away some of my equity. So yeah, if we go back before the flop, I hope this doesn't crash anything. If it does, all right, it's been great. Cheers. Okay, we're just gonna, nope, it's gonna, okay. Yeah, I think that's fine. right? That's probably about right. All combos tested. Good. Okay, so 44% equity I had pre-flop against 28% and 28% roughly. So that's a little reaffirming that, like, against these actual hands that people showed up with, we're three ways. I only need 33% equity to be getting my money in fair. So I can run this combo against some broader ranges. I'm not going to do that right now because when I did that yesterday, my whole system crashed. Now it's possible that that's because I had, I think, Photoshop open, which I don't now, and I've restarted my computer, but I'm going to avoid that kind of thing. Let's move on to some other hands. Enough about pocket aces and loss. All right, Queen, Queen, 7, 3. Also, so I prefaced that hand by saying something about sort of an emotional response. I mean, like, I'm fine. I've lost pots before. But sometimes, when you have in poker, there's these just occasional really big pots. And when you have some sort of a reaction, I think it's just important to, like, take a beat and be like, okay, like, maybe acknowledge that, like, you're having that feeling, and then try to just kind of, like, let it go, right? Forcing it away, denying it, I don't think is particularly useful, right? I think it generally doesn't work. Like, kind of like pushing anger down, then you're generally going to hold on to it. It can fester, but acknowledging it and then trying to, just releasing it and kind of moving forward and observing, if later in the session, if, it wasn't your last hand, then if later in the session you're still feeling it, maybe take a break. Maybe just quit your session if it's really affecting you. We do overall want to learn to deal with these sorts of emotions, not to simply run away from them all the time. But if it's so big that it's really going to affect your play, then you don't want to be playing a whole lot after something like that. But there's a whole lot to do with anxiety and all sorts of emotional stuff that we're not going to get too deep into now, but mostly just the idea of acknowledging that the emotions are there when they are, and not trying to fight against them, but not trying to hang on to them either. All right, we'll move on to other hands. Queen, Queen, 7, 3 with one suit. So the question was, is this a hand to play in the cutoff, and is this a hand to play in the cutoff, right? Very similar looking hands. So Queen, Queen, 7, 3, let's take a look. With one suit, it looks like it's probably playable in the cutoff. They want us to play Queen, Queen, 6, 4 with one suit, which is better, but that suit is to the 6. This suit's to the Queen, and I'd say those kind of make up for each other, so they're probably very similar. Queen, Queen, 9, 4 with a Queen high suit it plays, which, I don't know, maybe that's better than this. So this might be barely a fold, but it's certainly not a terrible open. It's certainly cuspy. So as long as we're identifying hands as cuspy that are cuspy, I think we're good. So we open raise, call, call, call. Flop's not good, and somebody pots it at us. So, we have nothing but our pair of queens. We've got, like, some blockers to some of the draws, but we're not calling a pot size bet with this. Not too much to talk about post flop. But on the pre-flop checkup, I'd say very cuspy and fine to play, fine to fold, probably. We'd need, like, the pre-flop matrix to really get a firm opinion on that. Then this one, I go ahead and fold, right? Which, on second evaluation, I think is probably better than the Queen, Queen, 7, 3, because this is suited to the king, and the king and the jack work together better than the 7 and the 3 work together. And I think that overcomes the difference between jacks and queens. Not super confident on that, so let's take a look at that one. That one, jack, jack, king, 4. It wants us to play jack, jack, 7, 6, where the jack is suited. So is this better or worse than that? Well, the jack, 7 connect, but not in a particularly meaningful way, right? Only to make a straight that the 7, 6 would make anyway. I guess technically then you're making a bigger straight, so that's better than having the gap at the bottom. The triple gap at the bottom, basically. But, with the king high suit and, just a king being a better card, I'd say this is close-ish, but probably a play. I do think that this hand is probably better than the last hand, and if anything, we got them backwards, where, you know, I folded this one and played the other one, whereas I probably should have played this one and maybe folded the other one. But again, both of these hands are cuspy, and I feel good about identifying that they're borderline. And the truth is, with borderline hands, it doesn't matter that much how you play them, because they're borderline. They're going to be very close to neutral EV. In a game like this, with high rake and a person who's going to cold call behind me a lot, probably folding both is good, though. I'm going to go with that. Okay, double suited aces. Nice. We raise and get one call, and then the flop comes 10-10-8. This is one where I'm not going to get that kind of binary feedback where I know for certain whether what I did was correct or not. They check. This is a player who had been fairly aggressive, and I was thinking I want to let them be aggressive. The trouble with that is, like, do I really want to call a turn and river bet? I'm not sure. Maybe just like putting $3 or $4 in here and then having sort of a river decision to make. And if they play it aggressively, I think I can kind of comfortably fold. I kind of like that approach more. I might be biased by the actual way the hand progressed, which was this queen came and they bet 3/4 pot. And I was looking at this and thinking, okay, if this were a river situation, I think calling is quite reasonable. However, do I want to be committed to calling this, and then on the river they can bet like about 20 almost, and if they bet, you know, 19 whatever on the river, like, unless it's an ace, there's just not going to be a lot of rivers that I'm confident on. You know, a jack can win for me for sure, but you know, I think I'm happy with my fold here. I think further, you know, in the future against this opponent, I'd be more likely to make the small bet on the flop, but you know, maybe calling the turns okay as well. So unfortunately, I don't think I can learn that much from this hand on my own. I'm certainly welcome to any feedback on it in the YouTube comments. If you ever want to talk about a hand, you can give the timestamp, and that'll help a lot in knowing which hand you're talking about. The pre-flop cards are also helpful, but having the timestamp is the most helpful. Okay, so Jack 8-8 folds to me. I decide, or sorry, there's a limp to me. I decide to over limp. I think raising here is fine. I think folding would definitely be bad. This hand's too good. I think, like, let's just look under the gun, right? Or in the low jack. That page has gone away. Is it at the back? Yeah, it is. Okay, so like Jack 7-7 is a hand that we want to be playing rainbow in the low jack, right? So at the tightest position at the table. So this is going to be a clear play in the cutoff, you know, with or without a limper. I think maybe I like raising a little bit more. We are going to flop a set fairly frequently. We don't have that much aside from that. We can make a couple different straights, one of them the nuts, one of them not. But I think the concept behind my over limp is fine as well. We're going to have generally a 4, maybe 5-way pot, often limped, right? We're not going to get a whole lot of raises behind us. And there's going to be enough money in the pot. Let's say there's $5 in the pot and we go pot, pot, pot. We're going to get close to stacks in anyway. So I think this is an okay-ish choice. Raising, also, if I raise, I'm still going to get this multi-way pot anyway. So I limp and I get raised behind me, which is interesting. And then it goes fold, fold, call, call. And I flop second set with the ace on board. Now, having seen later that this person was 3-betting queens against, you know, the low jack open, my low jack open, which was on the tighter side, I feel like I'm probably overweighting their range towards ace-ace here, but I still feel like even when they don't have ace-ace, they have so much equity against me that they haven't been super wild post-flop. You know, thinking about the SPR, though, what do we have? We have about 5-1. So do I just go down with the set here? I don't know. I kind of like the way I approached the hand, and if the turn were a clean card, but like, what is a clean card? A 6 through a 9, basically, not of diamonds. That's not a lot of cards. Obviously, pairing the board would be nice, even if it's an ace. then it's harder for them to have flopped a set of aces. And ace deuce is a possibility, but and ace jack, but also not super likely. So I don't know. If I raise here, I'm not quite getting it all in, but maybe against a loose passive kind of player like this, I should just be piling it in. Again, not certain. I think my approach is okay, and if this turn were like a 9 of spades and I check and they bet this much, I think I'd probably just get it in at that point, because you know, it's going to be so easy for them to make a river shove. If they made a smaller bet, I'd have been more likely to call. And you know, this does feel to me like a hand like king 10, ace ace, I think make a lot of sense with this. Even queen queen, you know, they could have been bluffing the flop, or had a big draw to go with their queens, and then been like, oh, this set's probably good, I'm not getting any pushback. I'm okay with my fold here. Feels pretty tight and nitty, but this really wasn't like the two factors on the turn. I didn't want a straight to get there, right? I go from the second nuts to the third nuts, and king 10 is a lot easier to make than ace ace, and my opponent decides to pot it as opposed to making maybe a smaller bet. So I go ahead and fold there. Jack, jack, 10, 5. Now, this is in the low jack. I marked this because I was pretty confident I'm supposed to fold it in the low jack. Let's just double check that. Yeah, it basically wants us to have, if single suited jacks, to have two cards that connect to the jack in some way. So clearly a fold. But comparing this to, what did we have? Jack, jack, king, 4. So looking again at that, you know, the cutoff RFI, like, I think this doesn't make the cut there. You know, jack jack 7-6, jack jack, you know, with a jack suited. I'd say this is not better than that, although maybe it's close, right? So this seems like a close cutoff thing, and on the button it's just going to be a very clear play. I mean, they're playing trip jacks with an ace, or with like a 3-2 suited. So I think very clear button open, cuspy on the cutoff, and I wasn't actually interested in whether I play it or fold it. In the low jack, I thought that was a very clear fold there. So each time we look up one of these pre-flop hands, the idea is to just refine the sense, right? Bit by bit, just kind of smooth out our pre-flop ranges to get a little bit closer each day to, you know, optimal, to playing a little bit better pre-flop approach every day. I'll have a little clearer view of what our range is, what it should be, and what our solid opponent's ranges are going to be. And I decided to raise this in the cutoff. Having this player behind me, maybe I want to be a little bit tighter. I think this is going to be a clear raise from the cutoff. It would be filed under ace and then 2 middling cards, basically. So button RFI, ace and 2 middling cards with a suit. It wants to play like ace 8 deuce, ace 7 6 5. I'd say this is clearly better than ace 8 deuce, or ace 7 8 7 deuce, right? So basically the same hand, but with a deuce instead of a jack. Although that's with the ace high suit. So this is also probably kind of borderline without the ace high suit. With the, you know, the jack high suit though is better than an 8 high suit. So I think it's fine, but kind of ish, right? And then we get 3 ways on the flop. There's a flush out there. I'm not going to do a lot of betting on boards like this. I do think because I have a blocker, I could put a bet out there, and I'm blocking any ace X combinations like ace queen, ace deuce, or ace ace. I'm blocking hearts, although there's still tons of hearts that people can have, and I have a pair of aces which, you know, has some value potentially, as long as nobody has a flush, or even if they do, I can run or a boat. So I think a C bet here wouldn't have been like way out of bounds, but like I've got some elements I want, but like make the 8 a 10 of hearts, right? And then at least I've got a gut shot, and I've got a little bit better flush blocker. I think as played, you know, I'm going to continue checking. Again, for all the reasons that maybe I can bet the flop, maybe I can bet the turn. I am blocking, you know, the straight. I'm blocking the flush. I still have an ace, and now I have a couple potential straight draws. But again, neither of them are very exciting, what with the flush being possible. And against these kind of loose passive players, I'm not trying to bluff too much. I'm mostly trying to just take the pots that it seems like they're not interested in and have those spots weighted towards the ones when I have good blockers. All right, I'm running out of vocal steam, and I only have 2 hands left, but I'm also out of water because I couldn't find my big water bottle. Where is it? Oh, wow. All right, so single gapper, single suited, right? So we've got a 1 gap, 1 suit. This hand, it actually recommends 8, 6, 5, 4 with a suited 6. My chart says to play this in the low jack, which in loose passive games like this, I believe I'm not going to do. The high rake environment as well, but if it's a play on the low jack, then it's super clearly going to be a play on the button, like no matter what the game conditions are, right? I was talking about having this lower gap. It's at the bottom. So if I hit a 5 and any of these other cards, I'm going to have a lot better straight draw possibilities than if the 7 was missing and I hit a 7. I'm just going to be drawing to the nuts more often. So there's going to be a lot of great flops possible. That is not one of them. My loose passive opponent checks to me, and I think I just go ahead and check back. Yeah, I've got some back doors, but I'm blocking a lot of the lower cards that I want them to have. If they have the higher cards, they're more likely to be with a king. I have no substantial information on this opponent at this point. Knowing later on, I'd feel a little differently. I flop a pair in a flush draw, and I'm betting sort of for equity denial, where if they just have a hand like, you know, Queen Jack 10-9 or whatever, right? Which I don't think they have a hand that good in terms of pre-flop. But that's got a lot of outs against me. And if I bet, they're probably going to fold that unless they also have spades. And if they call, then I'm making money on the bet. So this is kind of just being like, hey, if you've got garbage, just fold. Just give me the pot. Also, if you don't have garbage, if you have something, I have a chance of winning. And I'm blocking this 7. It's less likely that you just turned a 7. It's less likely you just turned spades. As it turned out, they turned a 7 and spades, which is kind of hilarious. They check, and, you know, I'm trying to think about this as a bluffing hand. Do I have too much showdown value? I don't know. But if they had a hand like Queens, Jacks, 10s, 9s, 8s, right, a pair bigger than the 7s, or even a better 7 than mine, I think I can get them to fold a fair amount because I have a fairly convincing story that, like, maybe I had an ace. Certainly would be possible here. And, you know, I didn't go for it. And it turns out that they had a better flush draw and a better 7. This is the sort of hand that I think I could have gotten them to fold with a river bet. Not a super convincing story that I could have told, but I can have aces here. It's very unlikely for them to have aces here. But when I check back the flop, I think I don't have a lot of king X. And they don't either, though. So, I don't know. I think reasonable bluffing spot on the river, but I decided to take my showdown value, and it was just not quite good enough because they had this pesky 10. All right, last hand of the day, King, Queen, 9-9. I get 3-bet. Again, I think in my mind, I was probably overweighting them towards ace-ace type hands. I do remember now what they ended up having, but you know, to gain from this hand, like in terms of taking lessons away, I think remembering like, yeah, their range isn't going to be that heavily weighted towards ace-ace. Also, if we look at the sizing, right, they make it 9, which isn't even 3x. I think they could have made it 11, right? The way you calculate the pot size, you know, you can do 3 times the bet plus the trail, so 3 times 350 would be 1050 plus the 50 cents, that's 11. Or you can mentally put in the call, so it's like, okay, 350, and then we add the 350 and the 50, so that's 750, and then you add the 750 to the call, which was 350, and that's 11. All right, PLO math for whatever. You know, I'm not folding this hand. This is towards the, not the top region, but the sort of upper middle region, or the lower upper region of my button raising range, because I'm going to be raising quite wide on the button. There's going to be a lot of good flops for me here. If I make a king high flush, having the 9 of spades is actually kind of nice, because now I'm going to be blocking nut flushes a little extra. It's going to make it harder to make a flush, but if I do happen to end up with that, I'm going to be able to play it a little bit more confidently, a little more comfortably than I otherwise would. Okay, I flopped not top trips. I flopped, you know, trips and the second kicker. having this pair in my hand when I flop trips is bad, because now in terms of boating up, I've got 2 9s and 3 queens and a king. So that's 6 total outs, right? 3 plus 2 plus 1. Whereas if these were all random cards, you know, I would have 9 cards of boat plus um, one king for the quads. So I'd have 10 outs to make a boater better. So we don't want this pair in our hand when we flop the trips. But, we don't really get to choose that. So I'm playing a little more cautiously than I would have if I had more, another boat card. But because of their line, I don't feel like Ace King is that likely. I feel like they probably would have c-bet here with Ace King most of the time. I think they're going to have Ace Ace a fair amount of the time. So I go ahead, half pot it. It's kind of, is this based on my hand or my range? I think it's kind of hand specific, which we don't usually want to be too, generally, I think with a lower level of expertise, we want to look at a flop, think, okay, what's my c-bet size on this flop? And then which hands do I want to put into that c-betting range? Which ones do I want to have my check back range? I'm not quite at the level where I should be making a bunch of different c-bet sizes, I think. But I think this c-bet size is okay. I'm mostly with my range am going to be trying to get, ace ace to call my like king x hands, and then I can have some wraps and stuff. The 10 comes, which I don't think is a bad card, because if they had some sort of rundown that had a 10, now they made trip 10s, which is a hand that can pay me a little bit more. Also, there are fewer combos of king 10, and I think 10-10 is pretty unlikely given the action. So I'm not really that concerned by this card. The only thing I don't like about the card is it makes me feel like ace ace is less likely to call. I'm less likely to get value there. And I don't think there's a lot of king x combos that they're going to have that I'm beating. So I go ahead and make another value bet here, which again feels okay-ish, and they call. And then on the river they check again, and we've got about a pot-sized bet left, right? A little less actually, because their stack is the effective stack, 65 with 70 in the middle. And there's two things going through my mind at this point. One, they very unlikely have a better hand, right? They're very unlikely to have me beat at this point. So I feel like I can kind of bet for value with somewhat with impunity, like 3-3, not likely. I don't think they have a king here that often. And if they do, I don't think it has a 3 very often. And I don't think it has an ace that often, because I think they play the flop more aggressively. So I'm pretty comfortable with my hand. But at the same time, I don't think there's a lot of hands I can get much value from. So maybe I should have bet smaller. I did decide to go with like a smaller bet size, which for me is half pot on the river. Now, if I got check raised, it's a spot where I just kind of cry. And I mean, like, I guess folds, right? I don't know. Am I at the top of my range because I only bet half? Or am I betting half with like my quads and stuff because I just feel like there's not that much they can call me with? I'm not sure. Quad 10s, I think, is a pretty happy hand here. I mean, yeah, they could slow play king king this way, but quad 10s is unblocking that king, which it can get value from here. Here, this is maybe thin. I'm not sure. I go ahead and I end up getting called by king queen, which is the same hand. We chop. They were doing better on the flop. Let's see. Can we bring up the equities? I'm gonna just briefly look at the equities of these hands on all streets. But I think overall I'm okay with how I played the hand. I think they played the hand reasonably. The pre-flop I'm not so sure about in terms of like their bet sizing was weird, and then it's a pretty nice hand, but having that dangler can't be good. So let's take a look at the equity calculator. We'll bring it over. Obviously on the river we're 50-50, so there's that 50-50. We chop. Let's see on the turn they're going to be a favorite, right? Because they're going to have a queen or a jack or a 6, and they're going to have a jack or a 6, which is a total of what, 5 outs? 6 outs, sorry. And I'm going to have 2 9s. Those are going to be the only ways to scoop the pot. Nobody had any flush draws. So they have 4 extra outs to scoop. Is that going to give them 55% or 57.5? What did I do wrong? Oh, I don't know. Anyway, so they're a little bit of a favorite there. They're going to be a little bit more of a favorite on the flop, actually fairly significant, right? So that shows how much it hurts having that pair, right? If you both flop the trips, having that pair is really quite bad. And now we're going to go back and calculate the pre-flop. And I'm a favorite, right? So that 6 is quite poor, it looks like. If we make the 6 like a 10, maybe? Let's see. And then this would be a nice, double suited rundown. We'll see what happens. Then they're a favorite, right? So if they had, and let's just do one more card. Let's make it an 8. So it's a card that connects, but it's not like premium or anything. I think this is going to be closer to 50-50. Yeah, so I'm still a favorite here. Yeah, so having that dangler hurts them. It doesn't necessarily mean definitively they should play it this way or that way. But this hand is just another sort of reinforcing factor in that lesson that I learned, I think, from the aces, which is like, don't overestimate the chance that a 3-better has aces. 3-betting ranges are wider than ace-ace. I had a hand yesterday where I felt like they basically probably just had ace-ace when they 3-bet, but that was a player who literally hadn't 3-bet, and they'd been really aggressive earlier. So again, I probably in that spot overestimated the chances they had ace-ace, but I think that read was a little stronger than these ones. This one, there's no reason that I should put them so much on ace-ace when they make this less than full 3-bet pre, and and I have so little data on them. So I think that's an error in my thinking that I can correct. That's more important than just how I played these hands. That's something to take away, and something we always want to try to take away, ways of improving our thought process beyond just how would I play this one hand, because you're not going to get the same spot, right? You're not going to get the same hand. I mean, yeah, pre-flop, raise and getting 3-bet, you're going to have the same situation, although it's going to be a different opponent, probably, maybe not, depending on who you play with. I guess on ignition it's going to be an unknown opponent, right? So yeah, just trying to learn concepts more than just details. Details are important, and concepts are based on details. There are underpinning, there are details that make up, it's like the forest or the trees. It's like you really need to be aware of both. But if we can take a concept away from a hand, then I think that's going to be extremely valuable. So I feel like I've done that today. Hopefully you've taken away something from it as well. As always, thank you so much for sticking with the stream. And if you're watching on YouTube, give a like, subscribe. I think I've got like a subscribe box up here now. I'm working on all the frills and whatnot. It's going to be a process, a slow process. I'm not trying to rush to be like and most excellent YouTuber, but I think over time I'll develop the skills, and we can have some fun and learn and yada yada yada. Okay, what's today? Have an excellent rest of your Sunday, and see you next time. Cheers.